Good morning. It's Saturday morning. We can sleep in. We can watch cartoons. But we can do that every day. Good morning and welcome to another installment, the second installment, but the first chapter, chapter 1 of The Key to Solomon's Key. Now, I know that a lot of you might not think you're interested in Freemasonry, which is a big part of the discussion of this book. But actually, it's a very universal subject, and it has, as we will see, a lot to do with everybody who's interested in Western civilization in general, and in Hermetics in particular. So I hope if you think that you might not be interested in the subject matter, that you give it a chance. So anyway, I'm going to read a footnote or two before I start, so I won't have to interrupt the text. One of the ancient landmarks of the craft of Masonry, going back as far as the medieval cathedral builders guilds, is that Freemasonry is exclusively a men's organization. Now, regular Masonry remains so today for no other reason than I can think of than the reluctance to abrogate any official ancient landmark. There are, however, lodges of co-masons, men and women, and other organizations that are exclusively for women. Now, since I wrote this book and since I wrote that footnote, I'm happy to say that that ancient landmark is crumbling all over the world. And I have many female Mason friends, and I've had them for years too. So, but it's still a very, in many quarters, a very conservative organization on the local level, and I'm not pretending that that's not so. Also, I'll be using the term Blue Lodge. And Blue Lodge is used to describe the three primary and fundamental degrees: Entered Apprentice, Fellowcraft, and Master Mason. Once a Mason has been raised to the degree of Master Mason, he may then go on to affiliate with other Masonic concordant rites, such as the York Rite, the Scottish Rite, and the Shrine. The ancient and accepted Scottish Rite is one of the most popular Masonic concordant bodies in the United States. That being said, Chapter 1. I confess I'm a Freemason. The epigram is taken directly from the Fellowcraft degree of the ancient free and accepted Masons. Masonry is a progressive moral science, divided into different degrees, and as its principles and mystic ceremonies are regularly developed and illustrated, it is intended and hoped that they will make a deep and lasting impression upon your mind. I'm a Freemason. In 1998, at the age of 50, I was raised in the same lodge that raised my father 50 years earlier. Masonry claims to make good men better. And although my father had many shortcomings, when all is said and done, he was the most noble and ethical man I've ever known. His morality as much as I observed, was almost entirely self-imposed. He was not a religious man, confessing only that he believed in a supreme being. But he was good for goodness sake, not in obedience to divine commandments, not out of fear of some deity. He was extremely proud to be a Mason, and although he didn't remain an active member of his lodge, he always wore his Blue Lodge and Scottish Rite rings and kept his dues scrupulously up to date. When I was a child, he enjoyed teasing me about the secret nature of the craft and would rattle off his titles: Secret Master, Perfect Master, Elu of the 12, Prince of Jerusalem, Knight Rose-Croix, Knight of the Brazen Serpent, Master of the Royal Secret. Master of the Royal Secret, that sounded interesting. And I had to ask why. What's the Royal Secret? I can't tell you. It's a secret. Please? No. Did you tell Mom? No. I can never tell your mother. I like that idea. We both laughed, and I felt like we already were sharing a Masonic secret. Once when I was about 5, and it was a Saturday morning, just like this, in Southern California, just like this. He showed me his lambskin apron. He put it on, carefully centering the knot in front so it was concealed by the apron's triangular flap. He gently smoothed it down with both hands and stood at attention and recited from memory, a lambskin apron. It is an emblem of innocence and the badge of a Mason. More ancient than the golden fleece or the Roman eagle, more honorable than the star and garter or any distinction that could be conferred upon me at that or any future period by king, prince, potentate, or any other person, and which it was hoped that I would wear with pleasure to myself and honor to the fraternity. I was very impressed. Then he smiled at me and made the most curious announcement. The next time you see me wearing this apron, I'll be dead and lying in my casket at my funeral. Those were strange words and a little hard for a 5-year-old to hear. But Dad was a pretty strange guy. He was right. The next time I saw him in his Masonic apron was at his funeral, less than 20 years later. He lived long enough to see my son born, but not long enough to see me become a Mason. We never became brothers. We never had the opportunity to discuss the royal secret. A snafu of some sort prevented his lodge brothers from showing up at the funeral to give him the fraternal send-off. We were assured a few days later by the master that the oversight caused heads to roll down at lodge. 26 years later, when I finally became a Mason, I was appointed chaplain to that same lodge. One of my first official acts was to arrange a proper Masonic graveside service. I have to confess I knew quite a lot about the craft before I joined. For the previous quarter century, I had enmeshed myself in the studies, practices, and intrigues of several initiatory orders and magical societies. Because many of the founders of these esoteric groups were Freemasons, I took it upon myself to become familiar with the history, doctrines, and rituals of the craft, especially those of the York and Scottish rites. I learned many other very interesting things along the way, too. By the time I finally joined, I wasn't seeking the same sort of esoteric titillation that spiced my initiatory adventures in these other, more secret societies. I knew from the beginning that I was entering an organization of mostly elderly men with whom I would have little in common except the bonds of fidelity that for centuries have united the fraternities. Men who, if they really got to know me, would most likely consider my interests too strange, my studies too occult, my politics too liberal, my morals too permissive, my writings too weird, and my spiritual worldview downright heretical. Men who, like my father, chose not to delve too deeply into mysteries that lie beneath the symbols and ceremonies that they and those that came before them so dutifully preserved. My expectations were low, and so I wasn't at all disappointed. I was welcomed into a lodge that boasted nearly 1,000 members, whose average age was 72. That's my age right now. A lodge whose tiny library contained only a handful of books relating to the esoteric foundations of Masonry, few of which, according to the sign-out sheet, had ever been checked out. It really didn't bother me that, as a matter of fact, it felt kind of good. For the first time in many years, I was the youngster in the group. I quickly grew to love my new brothers and enjoy their company. I came to the comfortable realization that no matter what else Masonry might be, it was a very big tent. And that if I behaved myself, there was place in that tent for me. It didn't matter to me that most of the old fellows could care less about the Eleusinian mysteries or the magic of the Babylonians, Egyptians, and Arabs, or the Kabbalah, or Gnosticism, or alchemy, or the suppressed history of Christendom. It didn't bother me when my new brothers answered my questions by saying things like, "Oh, that doesn't mean anything, it's just symbolic." So what, if the royal secret was still a mystery to these princes of the royal secret? I was just gratified for the fact that these gentlemen and generations of other dedicated souls had faithfully preserved and guarded the treasure of the craft, and were now, with shaking hands, delivering it safely to me across the centuries, as if it were sealed in a locked casket for which they had no key. I was grateful indeed, very grateful, for I had the key. And that's the end of chapter 1. Tomorrow, Sunday, we'll do chapter 2. I confess I'm a magician. So enjoy your weekend. Enjoy your Saturday. Be good to yourself. And be good to each other. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law. Love under will. And as the Masons might add, so mote it be.